our last video, I told you there was one other thing I wanted to share with you about South Park. And it's not about buildings or businesses or manufacturers. It's actually about crime. An incident that happened in South Park that not only made local, state, but also national news. This was an escape from a jail by two prisoners. One man everybody knew, his name was John Dillinger. He would later be killed in Chicago by the G-Men, who would later become known as the FBI. The other man hardly anybody knew. His name was Herbert Youngblood. He would be killed by the local sheriff's department in Port Huron, South Park to be specific. When Dillinger was captured, he was put into a jail in Crown Point, Indiana. A very safe and secure jail, or so they thought. The building you see in the very front is actually the home of the sheriff, with the jail sitting behind it. The sheriff in this case, and the person responsible for the security of the jail, was this woman here, Lillian Holly. I think back during that time period it'd be very unusual to have a woman for a sheriff. When Dillinger was captured, he was put deep into the jail. There were 9 steel doors that separated the cell block from freedom, which is why the sheriff felt confident her jail was escape-proof. On top of that, they had extra security with these guards that had shotguns and rifles and Tommy guns. They were fearful that Dillinger's gang might try to spring him. So who would be foolish enough to try to escape from this jail? Well, Mr. Dillinger. I think this is an amazing story. Only a small part of it has to do with Port Huron, but since I like a good story, and I think you might too, let me tell you the rest of it. The escape began at 9:15 a.m. on Saturday, March 3, 1934, when the turnkey arrived with an armful of soap for the 15 inmates in Dillinger's cell block, and this is a picture of his cell block. The outlaw grabbed the old man from behind, pressed a fake pistol to his side, and warned, "Do as I tell you or I'll blow you apart." Dillinger encouraged his fellow prisoners to join his escape attempt, but only Youngblood accepted the offer. And he did so enthusiastically too. Youngblood was an Afro-American from Gary, Indiana. He stood accused of murdering an Italian fruit vendor during a card game. His chances of avoiding the electric chair weren't good at all. Dillinger ordered the turnkey to summon a colleague, who also was fooled by the wooden decoy. And one by one, 4 more guards, including the warden, Lou Baker, were captured with the same ruse. Dillinger and Youngblood made their way to the jail's office, where they overpowered a dozing guard and armed themselves with machine guns and automatic pistols. They worked their way through the jail, capturing and locking up every living thing but the cat, one newspaper man said. They even rounded up 2 women working in the kitchen. Here's a photograph of that kitchen. They said, "Don't be frightened, Mrs. Baker. We're not going to hurt anyone. You two be good girls and nothing will happen to you." Before fleeing, Dillinger asked his hostages to empty their pockets. After collecting about $15, he couldn't resist mocking his jailers by showing off what they got out of that jail with: a wooden gun blackened with shoe polish. Dillinger said, "See what I locked all you monkeys up with? Nothing but a little piece of wood. Well, so long, boys. I have to be moving on." In this photograph here, the jail is actually behind that tree on the far right, or actually that would be the sheriff's home. The building to the left of that, with a large arched doorway, was City Hall. And then to the left of that was the garage that housed the sheriff's vehicles. Well, when Dillinger left, he went out the back door. He went along the backyard of the City Hall and came in the back of the garage. At this point, they had one jail employee as a hostage. And when they asked the mechanic which of these cars are the fastest, there was 3 of them. And they said, "Well, take the V8, that's the fastest one." And that happened to be the sheriff's car. And so they disabled the other 2 cars that you see here, and they took the sheriff's car for their escape. This is the sheriff's car here, and this would later be found in Chicago, where Dillinger left it. On a side note, that car is still in existence today from a collector, and you can see it here. It looks a little bit different. I think he made some changes to it that maybe weren't there originally. In this photo here, you can see some of the police officials and also curiosity seekers gathering around the jail after the escape. I found some rare footage of that interview that they did with the mechanic that Dillinger took as a hostage. I thought you might be interested in that. It's not that long. So let's take a look at it.
Mr. Seger, will you tell me just what took place over in the garage when John Dillinger walked in with a machine gun?
Why, he came up to the car that I was working on and had a machine gun and asked me what was the fastest car in the garage, and I told him the V8.
Whose car was that?
The sheriff's county car.
Mm-hmm. Then what happened? Did Dillinger threaten you in any way with the machine gun?
He told me to get in the car.
Who drove the car?
Mr. Blunt.
That is Deputy Sheriff Blunt.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Why, we left out of town north. And we got to the edge of town, we turned out and went west. And we went right straight through St. John's, and we got down the road a ways, and we went off of the road, and I had to get out and put the chains on in order to get out of the ditch. And after we got out of the ditch, we kept on going until we got to a hard road, and we went down the road a ways south, and he decided that he'd let us go, and he stopped the car and handed me $4, and we shook hands, and he pulled off.
What did he say to you when you shook hands?
Well, bid us the time of the day.
Was there any conversation took place during the time you were in the car?
Not amount to anything, no.
Not to amount to anything. Did you see a part of a razor used as a barrel in that gun?
No, I never seen the inside of the barrel.
After you get out of the car, then what did you do?
Why, we started for a farmhouse, and we met a car and stopped him, and he took us into Peatone to the police.
How did he act? Was he jolly?
Yes, he sang part of the way.
What did he sing?
Little dog, get along, little dog, get along.
That's so.
And the last roundup.
Did you see this toy gun at all in the car?
I just got a glimpse of it, yes.
Can you give me a little description of it? Was it made out of wood or what?
Well, it looked rather much like it, yes.
The two fugitives crossed into Illinois, where they released their hostages on a country lane and continued toward Chicago. In Chicago, the two men went their separate ways. Dillinger gave Youngblood $100, thanked him for his help, and they parted ways. Youngblood headed for Port Huron, and Dillinger stayed in Chicago and would later be gunned down in this very block that we're looking at here now. To the left there, just outside the Biograph Theater, which you see a little better picture of here. Youngblood had made his way to South Park, where he was staying. Booze and bragging would be Youngblood's undoing. It is claimed by the author of Dillinger, The Untold Story, published in 2005. It says this: "The night of Wednesday, March 14th, found him in the city of Port Huron, flashing a bankroll in the colored saloons of the city, and boasting of his acquaintances with Dillinger," they wrote. His big moment had arrived, and he was making the most of it. Word reached police headquarters on Friday morning that a thoroughly intoxicated man was making himself obnoxious in the small store of Mrs. Pearl Abraham. Mrs. Abraham's store was located at 2925 Moak Street, and in this picture here you can see it as folks are gathering around after the shooting. Youngblood was making a nuisance of himself in the store. knocking over products and displays as he stumbles about and declares himself a bad man. The outlaw's foolery in refusing to pay for a pack of cigarettes eventually results in the owner's son calling the police. 3 officers, Sheriff William Van Antwerp, Deputy Sheriff Charles Cavanaugh, and Deputy Howard Lawler, soon arrived to find out about the disturbance and put an end to it. Removing a .38 automatic from the belligerent drunk he finds in the store, given to the outlaw by Dillinger during the escape from Crown Point, Cavanaugh corrals Youngblood and the lawman relax slightly, thinking the arrest will be a routine one. Youngblood has other ideas, though, and now fancying himself as a real criminal, like his Crown Point buddy. Instead of submitting to custody, he pulls a concealed 10-shot .32 Savage automatic out of an unchecked pants pocket, and despite the odds against him, begins blasting away. In the slugfest which follows, as all 4 men unload their weapons, Cavanaugh receives mortal wounds from hits to both of his lungs. Van Antwerp and Lawler take damage to their chest. Both men would recover. Eugene Fields, the son of the store's owner, gets a flesh wound in his shoulder, and Youngblood is struck 10 times, taken to the emergency room at the nearest hospital. Youngblood passes away 4 hours later, but lingers on long enough to do Dillinger one last favor by lying to authorities, telling questioning lawmen that he left the public enemy just the day before, as the desperado was about to leave the United States and enter Canada. Of course, Dillinger was no place near Port Huron. Youngblood was only 29 years old when he died. 47-year-old Cavanaugh, a 22-year veteran of the police force, left behind a wife and a child. Looking at newspaper articles and hearing the interviews of the story, you'll notice that Youngblood wasn't mentioned at all. It wasn't that important. Dillinger was the big thing. But in Port Huron, South Park to be specific, Youngblood was a very big thing. Because of him, a husband and a father lost his life. Well, this concludes our segments on South Park. We've gone as far south as we're going to go. We've also gone as far north as we can, and as far east as we can, at least as far as Sarnia in some cases. In our next video, we'll start at Vantage Point and work our way west.